Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
What I'm going to talk about today is somewhat what would be my answer to Dana and Clay's question about what's a big research question I find really interesting. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm Judith Jonas. I run the Sociable Media Group at the MIT Media Lab, and we've been doing a lot of work with designing new interfaces for social interaction online. And I'm going to start with some background today about one of the ways I've been thinking about this lately, which is I've gotten very interested in looking at signaling theory from biology as a way of thinking about how do you design online social spaces. And the premise behind signaling theory, which is that most of the things we or animals out in the wild want to know about each other are hidden qualities. Are you stronger than me? Would you be a good father for my children? Are you cool enough for me to hang out with? You can't look at these qualities directly. What we rely on instead are some kind of visible signal that gives us some indication of the existence of this quality. And a lot of what signaling theory goes into, which I'm not going to get into any depth about today in 5 minutes, but is that there are different ways of making these signals reliable. Because signaling theory becomes interesting when you're in some kind of competition. If you are an animal and that animal wants to eat you, that's a clear competition. But even in our everyday life, we live in a very competitive world. Certainly if you are trying to date somebody, that's a competitive situation. But even among friends, there's a great deal of competition because people are often vying for status or even simply to make a better impression on each other. We can look at a lot of the things that Erving Goffman talks about in terms of face as a form of competition. You want to know what I'm really like because it helps you be a better predictor of how I'm going to act in the future, but I want you to think better of me than I actually am. And so the ways that I present a particular face, to use Goffman's term, can be construed as signals within the social world. Now, one of the reasons I became so interested in this is that in the physical world, a great deal of what we deal with are signals, but there are some directly viewable qualities. For instance, I can look at all of you and know what hair color you have. I mean, it might not be your natural hair color, which is a whole other. We can go into like blonde hair as a signal of things and stuff. I could see what your height is. But in the virtual world, almost everything we know about anybody else comes under this heading of signals, that it is not directly perceivable. So, there's a few minor things we can see. If I'm in a chat with you, I have a pretty good idea of how fast you can type. But for the most part, what we're seeing is signals, and we are seeing them in a space where a lot of these are what the signaling theorists call conventional signals. Because a lot of what makes signals reliable, you have to just trust me on this because I'm not going to get into the whole economics of it, is the cost of the signal in the domain of the thing that it is signaling. So in the world of animal signals, one of the big examples are moose who have giant, giant horns is a very good signal of their strength. And another moose may not fight them. They will rely on that signal. If it was a fakeable signal, sorry. If it was a fakeable signal, it would be you wouldn't be able to. Other moose wouldn't be able to rely on it. Wouldn't give up its territory for that. But because it takes so much strength to hold those horns, it's a reliable signal. Now, what I've become interested in the world of human communication, what are the types of things we're trying to signal? And what makes them reliable? So obvious ones are things like money. You could say, well, if I have a big, expensive car, that's a reliable signal of things. But more interestingly, in the online world, they're very interested. One of the things that's interesting is, what are the things that count as status in the virtual world? So for instance, one of the areas we've been looking at are things such as fashion, construed very broadly, not just clothing fashion, but the ways in which people display their access to knowledge. So if we look at one very obvious way of looking at that is with teens in something like MySpace, and how they listen to music and the changing ways in which you know what music is cool at a particular time. One of the ways you can look at that as a social signal is to say, this is a way of displaying your continuously updated access to knowing who the people are and where to get the information that lets you display your knowledge of what's cool this week. Another arena for this is looking at blogs, the world of sort of competitive blog posting, of going out and finding that piece of information that's going to be the cool posting, that's going to get picked up by the rest of the blog world, is something where people are paying enormous costs in terms of time and effort to search out that information to be at the top of that knowledge and status hierarchy. And so the research question I'm interested in here are, what are some of the other domains in the virtual world in which this is going to play out? And one of the things I found especially interesting here, looking at things like the gaming world, is looking at what is going to happen as we start using the computational powers of the machines in which we are communicating more than we do now. One of the things that's rather peculiar, and I think is a sign that we're still at the very, very early stages of online communication, is that we're still very stuck in mimicking the physical world. What we can do with email is actually less than what we can do with a letter. If I write you a letter, you get my handwriting, all kinds of, it's a physical record of me as a person. With email, you get the words. You don't even get that physical signal that you get with letter writing. And if you look at something like Second Life, one of the things I found really surprising about it is how pedestrian a representation it is. People look like people. They have kitchen counters. It looks like you've transferred the entire activity genre of going to Home Depot for the weekend into the virtual world, and you can kind of do a little bit of home improvement here and stuff. And so what I think is interesting is trying to understand what are the qualities that people are going to find especially interesting to know about each other. What are the domains that it's clearly not going to be physical strength, but what are the domains of qualities of perhaps being able to quickly reference all kinds of obscure cultural information, of being able to program things, being able to put things together quickly on the fly, that I think are going to be more inherent as the important qualities that people are going to signal as their status competition within the virtual world, and what are the tools that are going to support this. I think we see a little of this now in some of the online games where you could do very interesting things with avatars, and there's starting to be a mix of AI and reactions within these avatars. And I think seeing how that kind of thing is going to play out, and in particular where the user themselves has to have a big input in making that behavior of their avatar far more creative and reactive, is one direction. The other direction that I've seen very little of in terms of actual communication among people, but we're building the tools, are things like video and music mashups. If we think about what is, right now chat, you're just typing, but what about the kind of assisted chat that could start bringing in many, many more active components, whether it's video, whether it's programs, whether it's mini situations. So that's a research agenda I'm thinking about and want to get feedback from anyone who's interested. Thank you.